Hi, this is Tori Pool, and I'd like you to like, subscribe, and follow DNC Digital. Now, do it.
Alrighty. What's going on, everybody? This is D, back with another episode of DNC Radio. My guest today is Tori Pool. She's originally from Laredo, Texas. Last year, she got voted Best Stand-Up Comic in San Antonio. She's opened up for acts like Thea Vidal, Derek Sheen, and Daniel Van Kirk. She is the brown girl who says too much. Tori Pool, welcome to the show.
Hi.
How you doing today?
I'm good. I was nominated. I did not win.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I saw that and I thought that was the deal. But being nominated is just as much of an honor as they say, right?
Yeah. Thanks for bringing up old shit. Just kidding. Like, what if I was sad and started crying?
Well, this is what we do. We face stuff. We always face our past issues. So how's you know what? As we're recording this, it is a day after Mother's Day, and I know you have a son. So how was your Mother's Day?
Oh, Mother's Day was pretty cool. My son did nothing special for me aside from gracing his presence with us to watch a movie. That was about it. He was like, "Ugh, one day I have to do this for you," and I'm like, "Yeah, dude, like hang out with us." He's been living his best pandemic, just like half naked, doing video games. So I was happy that he was able to break away from that.
What movie did you guys watch?
We watched some new Netflix movie, Coffee and Kareem. Yeah, highly inappropriate for viewing with the family, but like deliciously inappropriate, you know?
Definitely an experience to behold. So you were during this pandemic. It's been kind of crazy for everybody. Like my kind of stuff. I usually go out to events and do interviews on camera, and now we're resorting to do kind of Skype like this. We're doing audio interviews. What's it like? I mean, you're obviously out of work because you're a stand-up comic, and you know places aren't able to be opened up. So are you still writing, or is this kind of like one of those things where you're mentally checked out and you may be rusty when you go back?
I'm definitely still writing. I have to, I'm a writer in general. I enjoy writing things like screenplay and I'm working on novels I'm still writing. Writing about the pandemic though is tricky. I been doing a lot of jokes about, wearing a bra. Like I put on a bra for you today. I will take it off immediately after this interview is over. And things like that, you know, it's been weird, but I'm still writing. If I wasn't, I would be going crazy, you know?
Yeah. So what is your pandemic been like? Because some people, the essential workers, they're going to work or, there is some kind of other things that they do. You obviously have your son, so you do have your hands tied and your time being used toward him. But when he's out, you know, doing his video gaming thing, in his underwear, what are you doing during all this?
Well, I'm lucky to have my temp job. I'm actually a temp. I'm an editor with a testing company. So I'm still working and, doing that. And then when I'm not doing that, I'm trying to work on this book thing that I've been working on for almost 2 years. And just really like trying to not isolate myself. That's been hard because I'm one of those suffer in silence girls, you know? Like, I like to be super sad and it's been hard because I've had friends that are like, hey, let's Zoom, let's party and do all this Zoom party stuff. And I think it's kind of, I don't know. I'm not a Zoom party girl. I'd rather like see everybody when things open up, which is, I don't know when, but it's been really, just a matter of me getting used to being home. Like I went from never being home to being home and that's been wild. Like seeing my husband and like having to talk to him, that's been like, what, you know, trying not to get annoyed with him chewing, which is something that's been happening. Like when we dine together, I'm like, I can hear you. Can you hear me? You know? So that's been weird. Just, you know, trying to be a person because I was used to being someone that was pulled in multiple directions, you know?
So how long have you been married? And what has the pandemic done for your marriage, seeing that you were always away? And I remember you were saying in a past interview that that he had a job too, and he got let go.
Yeah. He's a tattoo artist, so they can't work right now. Um, and it'll be 14 years in July, 14 years.
Jeez.
Yeah, it's terrible. I think that before it was always like, there was always a buffer because I had so much to do. And now I'm like, oh, this is how you look, you know? Like we're kind of at each other's throats a little bit, but it makes for good comedy. You know, I was sitting writing the other day about like, why can I suddenly hear him chew so clearly? You know, like it's like, ooh, it was not great. But he's super supportive of everything. He's like the best husband, and I'm just like the shittiest wife, honestly. I'm just not great. I'm like not a great
Not
person.
a lot of women are, you know, as self-aware as you may be.
I try to keep it honest, you know, like when I started comedy, I was like, dude, I can't do this unless you let me be open about everything. And he was like, yeah, I don't care, you know. We have had instances. I do make jokes about, he likes to play with tech decks. I don't know if you know what tech decks are, the little skateboards.
Yeah. I remember
Yeah.
those things.
I've had
Way back then, I used to dabble with a few
dabble
tech
in
decks
it.
myself. Yes.
It's an art form I've learned, but when I started doing jokes making fun of his tech deck usage, I had some of his friends block me on Instagram because they were like, I don't like you talking about Jason like that. And I'm like, bye baby. I don't care. Yeah. All right.
Well, you say in a set. I looked you up on YouTube. You say in a set that you were a high school dropout who used to be a high school teacher.
Yeah.
Uh, Tell me about that experience. What was it that you were teaching, and why aren't you a teacher anymore?
I was a creative writing director for the Northeast School of the Arts. I was
Cool.
there designing curriculum. So I taught a screenplay, I taught novel writing, I taught poetry, basically every facet of storytelling for them. And I loved it. I still like, I'm actually considering doing some online classes for this company just because I really liked it. And I left because a student reported my comedy Instagram because they were failing two of my
Oh,
classes. And
that
I
little
didn't
shit.
exactly. Yeah, I hope that they are trash. I have nothing nice to say
Jesus.
about them. Uh, but it was a shock how administration handled it and how they handled it. I was like, I'm out. I'm not doing this. This is ridiculous.
How did that go?
Well, they just, rather than talking to me, like it happened right before Thanksgiving break. Um, and so the Friday, like I was on my way to a show at the Secret Group in Houston, and I got a call from the principal, and they were like, "We're placing you on administrative leave. When you come back, we'll sit down and talk to you about." And I was like, "About what?" And they're like, "We'll talk to you about it then." And I was like, "Well, what is it?" And they said, "Well, you have an Instagram, right?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's for my comedy business." And they were like, "Why isn't it set to private?" And I was like, "Because I get booked if people see me. I also have a YouTube, I have a Facebook, I have Twitter, I have all that." And and they were like, "We'll talk about it then. We'll talk about it then." And it was just so terrible. I spent the week seriously thinking about how much I did for the school, building their curriculum, spending 70, 80-hour work weeks, not getting paid overtime. And then to have one little kid who was failing, they didn't call the kid in for failing, you know. They decided to put me on administrative leave with no, warning. And that was like, it was devastating. I took the week to think, do I ever want to feel this again? Because if they could do it the first time, will they do it again? You know? And I just decided that it was time to leave. So
If the kid didn't report your comedy Instagram, would you still find yourself being a teacher and a part-time comedian?
yeah, hell yeah, dude. I loved it. I taught gifted and talented students how to write, how to perform. It was everything that I was really good at it too, you know? And for one kid to kind of put that onto question and then put me on the chopping block, I'm like, nope, not ever again. I don't ever want to be in that position where a kid that's unhappy or a parent that is going to, be unhappy with something stupid like that. I would never do that again. I don't ever want to be in that position again.
So here's a question to parallel your two careers that you've had that you spoke about today. Would it be more fulfilling for a kid to hand in something written that has the value of an A plus, or would it be more fulfilling to get the crowd in a comedy club just to crack up, applause break for one of your jokes?
Oh, it's two different. It's kind of two different experiences. Like when I was able to teach a kid story, or teach a kid how to perform a poem, and to see them succeed was always an excellent feeling. I was like, oh wow, they're really connecting with this writing. Or introduce them to a new book or a new genre of film, and they'd be like, to see them click. That was always super satisfying, because I knew I was good at what I was doing. And it is similar that when a crowd reacts to a punchline, I'm like, oh, hell yeah, it feels good, but it is two different feelings. I feel addicted to being good at comedy. Like if I have a great night, I'm like, oh yes, I want this feeling all the time. When I have a bad night, I'm like, oh, I should just kill myself. I never felt that way in the classroom. Like if I didn't reach a student, I wasn't like, oh, my life is over. I was just like, okay, how do I reach them? It was always a rethink on my part to be good.
Do you ever have that kind of feeling after maybe not so good of a night on stage?
Oh yeah. Just the other night. I haven't had bad nights doing stand up, in person in a while. I'm sure I will when I get back. They would always happen few and far between with the more experience you have on stage. And then it would always happen with new jokes. Like sometimes I would try to go too far into new jokes, and then nothing would hit, and I'd be like, oh, okay, well, I suck. Doing comedy from home, I've had some of those same feelings like resurface. Like the other day, I felt that I bombed on this ladies' room comedy show out of California. They were super nice, and they were like, no, you're great. I was like, no, that was terrible. But it's just way different doing comedy at home versus doing comedy on a stage, like I'm lucky, when you're on stage, it's just you don't have any distractors. I did a set, excuse me, I'm going to cough. I did a set just a couple days ago, and I'm in a room, right, where we audio record and stuff. On the other side of the room is my son's room, and his bed is on that side, right? Well, my huge pit bull fell in between the bed and the wall. And so it was like crashing and screaming as I started my set.
As you're starting your set.
And I was like, hi, I'm sorry, do you guys hear that? And they were like, no. And then I completely, it hasn't happened in so long, and I completely forgot what I was going to do. Like my head was in the zone, and then suddenly it's like crashing and banging, and the wall was shaking, and I was like, oh my God, what's happening?
So instead of small conversations and like the bartender doing something or the waitress walking around, now it's your kid in the background.
Yeah, like I've never had to worry about like my kid or my pit bull taking the wall down. You know what I mean? Like when I'm on stage, if somebody interrupts me, I bring them into it. I'm like, oh, okay, you want to talk to me? If a heckler or a bartender or somebody's loud, I address it. This was like nothing I'd ever experienced. I was like, oh my God, how embarrassing. And then I just fumbled through my jokes. I ran the light, and then I'm like on my cell phone, and then I tried to click to get out of it, and then the phone fell, and I was like, fuck it, I'm done. Like, I was mortified.
So let's get into the start of comedy. You were saying that you had some people that you looked up to, and you always had an interest in comedy as a kid, but you did say you had some confidence issues. How does one get over that? Not only that, but now you're going to go on stage and people are going to be staring at you for, 6, 7, 10 minutes?
Yeah, or 30 or 45 as of later in my career. But like when I was little, my brother and we would my mom was real social, and she would go out and she would bring people back. And we were supposed to be asleep, and we would go and we would act out stupid skits. Like Saturday Night Live was our thing. And, my mom would be like, tell us a joke. And I'd tell a joke. And it was always really inappropriate because I was watching HBO specials at a very young age. And we had like comedy records, we had Red Fox and we had Eddie Murphy and we had Lily Tomlin. Like we had all this stuff in the house already because my mom was a fan. And growing up, my brother and I thought that we were going to be like a comedy duo. And then that idea just kind of like, as soon as we started, because we're 4 years apart, as soon as he got older, like, middle school and stuff, it was not cool to hang out with your sister. So that idea kind of faded. And then I've always felt like scared to be the center of attention because I thought, oh my God, what if somebody doesn't want to listen to me? Like, what am I going to do if someone interrupts me? Because I've always had a temper, I was like afraid that I would go off on someone if they were like, shut up, or I'd be like, I'll fucking kill you. I was afraid of that result. But I had always liked being the center of attention. Like I used to perform poetry slams and do things like that. And I thought I was going to be a poet. But then I was like, that's stupid. I don't want to be a poet. They're poor.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. And then I thought I would try comedy, but I really was afraid that being on stage, I would get called fat for some reason, or just like any insecurity, any flaw would be up for grabs. I didn't understand that I would have control. And yeah, I mean, I've had people heckle and stuff. In the beginning, it used to throw me completely off. I'd be like, oh, what am I doing? Or I'd barrel through whatever jokes I was trying to say, which if you do that, the audience has no time to hear you. Or if you ignore it, the audience is too busy looking at that guy instead of you. So yeah, I had to deal with all that stuff with really just thinking like it would be me in control and that it wouldn't be, I don't know why. I thought people would be like, oh, like attacking my weight or attacking the way that I looked or being weird like that. And it's not like that at all. So
do you feel like maybe I don't see you doing it, and I applaud you for it because I feel like it may be a crutch. Do you feel like maybe plus size comics use that as an easy way to just, self-deprecating humor can be funny, but do you feel like they just lean on it maybe a little too much?
Oh, yeah. I think that it's tough to be a female comedian because it seems like a lot of comics do self-deprecating humor, but especially females, or they are over-sexualized completely. And yeah, I can do dirty stuff in a bar to grab attention, but I never, my goal is to be a professional and to really write jokes. So I've always kind of steered away from that. I will say that I talk a lot about my personal life because in the beginning, I look a certain way, I look mean. Like I have RBF. If I'm not smiling, somebody's like, what's wrong? Every 5 seconds. It's the most annoying thing, but it's true. Being Latina or being Peruvian, it's just, I have that face. So a lot of the jokes that I have were really about humanizing me. Like I'm a mother. I was a teacher. I'm a wife, albeit terrible wife. And so a lot of those jokes are about that. It wasn't until this year that I started getting into actual topics and things that I want to talk about. But I built my first 30 minutes off of marriage, kid, job, So that's different in that aspect because a lot of people will do the self-deprecating stuff. I'm only now starting to write about weight in general, just because I think that I've been getting these weird shapewear advertisements for girls like stuffing themselves into shapewear. And it's just so funny to me because they're like, oh, I love it. I look great. And I'm like, you look like you're moving around your insides, like that does not look great. So I've been thinking a lot about that, but I always thought if I did self-deprecating stuff that it would lead me to be insulted and then I would lose my shit on someone. Does that make sense?
No, I understood. When it comes to the female comic, it's a interesting dynamic because every female comic you look back, they are like a badass, and they can hold their own in a conversation and or arguments. When it comes to the female comedian being on stage and being like, I'm going to use air quotes when I say edgy. Do you feel like that's who they are to survive in the industry, or do you feel like that's something they have to conform to make it in the industry?
I definitely think it's a mixture. I envy those that can talk about the kinds of things they can. You know, I avoid the dirty stuff because I feel like it's a crutch. I avoid shock comedy in general because I feel like it's a crutch. I'm not. Some comic once was like, "Oh, you want to be Amy Schumer?" Because I once did a joke about some guy having, or I do a joke about a guy who messaged me for feet pics or whatever, and I was practicing the joke one night, and this comic was watching me, and then afterwards he was like, "You think you're Amy Schumer or what?" And I was like, "I didn't curse once. All I did was relay a message that I received and then did different levels of how ridiculous it was, you know?" But I thought it was funny that that's the first reaction is like, "Oh, you want to talk about, you know, getting weird messages. You must be Amy Schumer." And I'm like, dude, what are you talking about? You don't even know me. I'm Tori. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
This is also the same guy that wanted me to change my last name to be more Mexican. So I will not ever take that advice. Um, so ridiculous. I feel like women
Can you?
have,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, no. I just feel like women have all these like things, you know, like don't, I've been told you talk about your husband too much. They want to see you as single, you know, pick a guy in the audience and hit on him. Nobody wants to hear about your vagina. Like I've been given all these different rules since I started comedy, and I'm always like, cool. It always comes from someone that's been in the game longer and they like want to like give you unsolicited advice on how to make it, but they themselves haven't made it.
Yeah,
So,
that's strange to hear because I've been on stage a handful of times. Years ago, I did stand up, but I've never gotten instructions like that. It
mhm.
has to be, because you're a woman and they say they want, they want, they want. Do you think about what's funny to you when you're writing, or do you think about how people are going to take it? Because I mean, your job and your career is based on laughs. So
Mhm.
who do you write for when it comes to writing your sets?
I really write, I write what I think is funny, and then I try to make sure that there's some nuance to it. You know, when I first have a joke, I Google it and I see what has someone else said about it. If something comes up too similar, I'm like, okay, no, that's not going to work. I do, I write a lot about from my experiences because I feel like nobody can copy that, you know?
Hmm. Hmm.
And my thoughts, I have stupid thoughts all day long, or I read something and I'm like, okay, write that down. And then a lot of it is me trying to format that into setup punch. So where there's one line where it's like, this is what my subject is, and this is what's funny about it. And that's how I try to tend to think about jokes now. That is something that's a continuous muscle that I have to use. And so it makes it to where I don't know, sometimes I think people feel weird talking to me. I've noticed it a lot this last year because I do spend a lot of time in my head, and then someone will be telling me a story or something and they're like, "Oh, you can put that in your act." And I'm like, "What? I'm not, what? Thank you." Or people will send me jokes like, "Oh, I was thinking that you could use this." And I'm like, "Dude, I don't
Is
need."
that something that you encounter a lot of people just, oh, you're a comedian. Can I give you this joke and you can use it if you want?
Yeah, yeah. I was at a bar like 6 months ago, a luchador bar, hanging out for an open mic, and this guy was super drunk, and he was like, "Hey, I'll sell you a joke." And I was like,
I'll
what?
sell you a joke.
Yeah, yeah. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, yeah, 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 I'll sell you a joke. And I was like, do I get a preview of this joke? And, and he started telling me like a drunken internet joke. And I looked at him and I was like, nah, man, that's so good. You should keep it. You should try it. And he's like, oh, you're making fun of me. And I was like, yeah, I am. Get the fuck out of here. Like, I'm not gonna, no. And I have people, and the reverse of that is I have people that I went to college with that are like, oh, this funny thing happened to me. Maybe you could use it in one of your sets. And I'm like, you should use it. That's my thing is, whenever somebody, male, female, has come to me with something and they're like, hey, this is really funny. This happened. My response is, well, why don't you do that? Why don't you go to an open mic? Why don't you try it? I always want my jokes to sound like me. I feel like if they don't, then I'm doing something wrong. I can tell when men write for women, it's usually over sexualized and ridiculous. This one, I heard a comic one time and she was talking about being like, she was trying to make rape a joke. And I thought she must be writing with some man. And it turned out she was. And I was like, dude, what are you doing?
Not only being a female, but you're half Mexican, half Peruvian. And we're going to get to the funny part of all of that in a second. But being a Latina comic, a Hispanic woman on stage, does the race card come into play when they expect, oh, she's not talking about anything Hispanic, she's just talking. Do they expect something like, oh, make us laugh like George Lopez or like Gabriel Iglesias? Do they expect something to be grounded in the Hispanic tradition when it comes to your jokes?
Yes. Well, some people do. I don't know if you remember, we had that Latino Laugh festival just in February. It came to San Antonio, and I had auditioned for that. What was it called? Gosh, I can't remember what it's called now. The name escapes me. Insert name here. I had auditioned for that back in November, and I was told by the person that I should consider changing my last name. My maiden name is Vasquez, and should I go back to Tori Vasquez? And I'm like, I've been married for 13 years, dude. Like, I'm trying to use that white name to get as far as I can. Like, I like my last name. I like Tori Pool. That's what I started stand up under. I had no intention to change my name. And even though they liked my story, they didn't like my attitude. That I wasn't malleable to formulate some other idea of a Latina comic. My whole thing was people are going to see me and know that I'm Latina, although I will say that I did a show recently and the first question out of a host's mouth was, what are you?
Oh God,
So,
I was gonna get to that. I saw that clip you posted, and I'm looking at it like, holy, did she hear herself?
no,
I used to be
no.
I was serving at a restaurant, and I was having a conversation with a grown woman, had to have had grandchildren, and it comes out that I'm not Mexican. She goes, oh, so you're not Hispanic? I'm like, no, I am. I'm just Peruvian. My family's from Peru, and that's where I get my Hispanic from. She's like, no, you're not Hispanic. I'm like,
Oh my
what are you saying? She's like, no, you're I was like, Hispanic country, I believe, is defined as any country that speaks Spanish. She looks at me. This grown woman who probably has grandchildren says, oh, they speak Spanish? I'm like,
Oh my
yeah, they do.
God.
She's like, oh, I thought they were like El Salvador. And I'm like, they speak Spanish too. And I'm going to walk away because now I'm afraid that my daughter is going to grow up in this education system. Can you talk about, I don't even know how to say it, like the difference between both cultures and both traditions, the food and the fact that Peru is not Hispanic to some people?
Yeah, I co-wrote that card game, Latino Card Revoked, and as we were
Yes,
going
yes.
into it, the person that I was writing with, we both had an issue with it being called Latino Card Revoked because Latino is a term used in the U.S. It's not even used outside of the U.S.
Hmm.
Everyone uses their country of origin when describing themselves,
Yes.
Peruvian, Mexican, and so forth. And so I struggle with that all the time. I have a joke about, a setup to a joke where I'm like, well, some people call us Latino, some people call us Mexicans, the rest of us are just calling us immigrants, and everybody's like, oh, and I'm like, yeah, but what is it about everyone else that has to define us? I, being Peruvian is really important to me. Even though I'm estranged from my father, like he was a Peruvian immigrant. And I mean, that's how he got his citizenship, was fighting in the Vietnam War. I still have family in Peru. I've never been. And it's a point of contention for me because I'm really appreciative of that. And then my mother was Mexican and Spanish. So there's also that too. And I've been joking recently that, like, okay, well, I'm Peruvian, Mexican, and Spanish and pretty much PMS, which
Jeez.
is not great. I'm PMS incarnate, but all of those cultures together, have just really, it's been interesting, like how people react and how people want to categorize me. That woman, thought I was racially ambiguous. And to me, I think it's rude. I've never met somebody and gone, what are you? Like I would never do that. And I would hope people wouldn't do that to my son, but I'm sure it's going to happen. I don't understand people's need to, define things in that manner. So I really just I don't get it. I think people are really dumb is what it is,
I think a person is intelligent, but people are dumb, if that makes any
Yes.
sense.
No, I agree. I started diving in because of the reaction to me trying to, I really wanted that comedy festival that I can't think of the name of. I really wanted to
Hmm.
be in it. I wanted to represent San Antonio. I even did the mayor's ball last year or this year. Gosh, it feels like last year. And I got to represent as, a comic in San Antonio. And I was like, dude, I get a couple steps forward and then I always get a couple steps back, it seems like. And I know a lot of it's being a woman, which sucks, but I'm sure that Hispanic thing is in there too. I never understood Hispanic. My mom used to get mad because I'd be like, what are we? Should I put Native American? And she's like, no, you're South American Indian, you're not Native American. I'm like, but I'm still Indian, like, and I would always want to put that distinction on there. So I just feel like I'm just like a mixture. I don't know what it all means, but I know that people get very offended. But Peru, I don't know. Have you been?
Have you? Yeah, I used to go every year, and then I stopped when my mom said I had to start paying for my tickets. I used to go as a kid all the time. Well, my both of my parents are fully Peruvian, so that's the only outside country that I have any connection to. Outside of like my great great grandfather was Italian, so that explains the hair gel. But
Yeah.
yeah, I love Peru. My ex is Mexican, so my daughter is half Peruvian, half Mexican, and being from where I am, or excuse me, being where I live in South Texas, it's predominantly Mexican. So I try my best to talk about her Peruvian background, and I intend to take her out to Peru and show her the different history that we have. And I have no problem with her knowing her Mexican history. That's her history, and that's
Yeah.
something she should know. But I feel like that's all they teach out here when it
Yeah.
comes to world history. And that's, you see a lack of exposure leads to a lack of education. That's
Hmm.
why that woman didn't think I was Hispanic because I wasn't Mexican. It's because they don't teach anything
Yeah.
other than that, and I get it that it's predominantly Mexican and it's better. It's probably like we might as well just teach Mexican history, but they should also. I mean, nobody knows about the Cold War or the War of 1812 or
Yeah.
who settled Peru in the name of Spain or the fact that Brazil was settled by Portugal. Nobody like. There was a girl who didn't even know that you can drive to Alaska. And I'm like, where is your geography teacher so I can smack him in the face? Do you own a map? It's something that I struggle with, but you got to do what you can at home.
Yeah.
Have you tried like Peruvian food?
Oh yeah, no. Ceviche and is like my favorite thing. I never can make it. My brother makes it excellently. I actually was just harassing him recently to make some for me because he's being stingy. But ceviche is my go-to all the time, or the carne, what is it called? The steak in
Like
the pan. What is it called?
like
Can't
like
think.
lomo saltado, the chapa stuff.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes, I love that.
that is my go-to.
That's my growing up. That was what my dad, whenever he came through, that was what he would make. And like just thinking about it, my mouth waters. And we used to support this little Peruvian restaurant, but now it's like some other name, so I haven't gone back. I went to have the ceviche, it was not great. But there's Walditos. He's a very invasive Peruvian man. But he has
So
good Peruvian
you mean a
food.
Peruvian man? That's pretty much it.
Yeah. He's always like, "Oh, you look like one of my daughters." And I'm like, "I'm not, dude." But he'll sit with you when
The
we're
ones that
trying to
hug you
eat.
too tight.
Yeah. I'm like, "No, stop it." So my husband doesn't like going there because he's like, "Dude, he's so invasive." I was like, "He's just trying to be like a family member. That's all."
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I made my son try ceviche a couple of years ago, and he was just like, no, and he's tried it again since then, and he's like, I still don't like it, Mama. I'm like, okay. I gave him a cola, one of the golden colas, and he was just like, oh, like
Oh, the
sugar, and he
Inca
let it.
Cola. That
Yes,
is.
I love those. And he's just like let it spill out of his mouth. And I was like, what are you doing? And it was just like pouring. He's like, it's sugar. And I'm like, all right.
The
He
only
doesn't
thing that I can
really
remember,
drink it.
I don't know if you guys have, well, you guys, you're only like 3 hours away. If you have Big Red up there,
We do.
that's the
Yeah.
closest thing to Inca Cola, I think. It kind
Yeah.
of
It
tastes like
is. It's got that same like waxy aftertaste. But I really like the golden cola. I still like I'll order it from like Amazon and stuff. But no, my son is really interested in Peru and he wants to go there. He really would like to meet my dad, who would probably be like a wealth of information, but we just don't talk, so I don't know.
it. Not having to go into that, but a lot of comedians they say are the most depressed people in the world. And when I was doing comedy, I can attest to that. When Kevin Hart did Laugh at My Pain, I found
Hmm.
it so interesting because how do you take something that's so painful and make people laugh with it, or even construct the joke? It's not even like make people laugh with it. Now you're going deeper, like the layers down there that to take what happened to me and now construct a joke to make people laugh. You got people like Robin Williams, who was, geez, no words can explain what I feel about him. He used to go do USO tours, just because, and he just wasn't feeling right with himself,
Yeah.
and he did that, and he ended it. Can you talk about,
Yeah. Um,
like, what a comedian feels internally, and how this can be therapeutic for them to go on stage?
there is nothing. I am a depressed person. I would say, yeah, totally. I used to, if I was having a bad night, if I had a stupid fight with my husband or anything, I would get to the club, Blind Tiger, which is where I would perform on Fridays. And I would see my friends and, they'd be like, you're okay. And I'm like, ugh, like I just have to work through it. And then I would go up and I would perform and then it's like there's an instant high, getting those laughs and then feeling affirmed as a person and
Yeah.
then walking off stage and having people that have never seen me perform come up and ask, where can I find you? And oh my God, you're so funny. And just like feeding me those compliments and stuff. Yeah, it totally helped. it totally made me more, I guess, easier to be around, because you have that reassurance, that instant
It's like a
gratification
feeling
atop
of
of
warmth.
reassurance. Exactly.
Yeah.
That I'm not, you know, that I'm not some, I guess that I'm someone and I'm not unmemorable. You know, we all want to be remembered. I did lose my mother, who I was very close to, in September and of last year, and that was that's like the probably the source of all of my depression now. And I just started really writing about childhood after that happened. And most of my jokes coming into the new year were about being little. And like, if I tried to, I was still trying to make this joke word work before the world fell apart, but it was about not having a dad growing up. And I would get laughs up until a certain point, and at the last punchline, when I would say, you know, I can't remember the punchline off the top of my head, but when I would allude to the fact that, you know, he left me, I would get the ah, and I would get so fucking frustrated because I would get the ah instead of a laugh. Because if I was a guy and I had said, oh, and they left me, I think it would be a different reaction,
Yeah,
you know?
that's a good point. Daddy issues from a male comic are different than daddy issues with a female comic.
Yeah, and it would start to incite sympathy, and I was like, ah, fuck. And so that's what I was working on, was getting rid of the sympathy boot. Nobody wants to hear the ah, they want to hear a laugh, you know? But that was part of the good thing about that was that I noticed that the crowd started to have buy-in with me. Like they knew me and they sympathized with me without me trying to garner sympathy. They were like, oh shit, we like you. We don't want you to be in pain.
Now,
And I was like,
there's an
ah, okay,
investment
cool.
now.
Exactly. I did start to try to do jokes about my mother's death. I have a couple. And it's hard, you know, it's like one of them is about her final blessing from a preacher. And it was a really funny situation that I started to make into a joke. And I think I did it like a month after, and it was still really raw. And I was like, I'm going to have
Didn't
to
feel too
shelf
good
this
about
for a while. Yeah. But I know that it's funny, and I know that it'll be funny when it's ready. So I think that Stanhope said, that a lot of comedy is like, pain plus time, you know? So you gotta wait a little
You have
bit
to
on
get over it
something.
yourself so that you can finally talk about it. And I mean, sometimes it takes a long time just to talk about something, let alone make a joke about it, try to make people
Yeah.
laugh.
Yeah, I think it's
Um,
tragedy plus pain equals comedy, or plus time. I forget what the exact formula is, but I do little jokes about her not being with me, and they hit. But when I get into the longer stuff, I'm still working all that out, and I'm kind of shelved it. I was like, okay, well, this is too raw. I can talk about dad shit because dude hasn't been around for a while, but like my mom she was like everything, so that's still very rough.
I used to do dad jokes, being a server at a restaurant. I mean, I do jokes just standing there because that's pretty much how I make my money. I gotta entertain them to the point that they like me and they want to come back, and you know the whole deal. But
Yeah.
I did a joke and they kind of did that uncomfortable laugh, like, oh man. But I was like, I haven't seen my father in 20 years. They're like, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm like, no, I'm making the joke. I'm okay.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
totally fine. I can talk about this. Talk about Latino card revoked. You mentioned that earlier, and it's something that you put together. Let the listeners know what it's about.
So Latino Card Revoke was co-written with me and Gloralise Mora over in New York. She and I tried to, in a very short deck of cards, grab everything we could from different Latino cultures, to make part trivia, part familial experience. So like some of the cards are very much like, you know, facts about Latina cultures or Latino cultures, and then other cards are about kind of family responses. Like I really, all the cards that I wrote were really about like how grandma or how my mom would react to certain situations. Like, and so that was fun. My only problem with the game is that it needed to be bigger because there was no way we could capture the whole Latino culture, especially like Texas Latinos are different from New York Latinos or,
Yes, they are.
Peru Latinos, or California Latinos. And that was the different states that we focused on was like New York, Texas, California, Florida, and just trying to like, it was a big job. And I think we did okay. Like I've had friends play the game and they're like, oh, this is fun. And then I've had friends play the game and they're like, this is hard. Some of these trivia questions are too hard. And I'm like, well, educate yourself, fool. Like, so we tried to have fun with it, and we've had good sales. I'm hoping that when the world goes back, maybe we can do another one because I want to extend that pack. And I've talked with friends about like doing a special Texas edition because things are different here than they are everywhere.
Yeah, much different. I feel like with the exception of a couple more states that you can add on to the list that you just named about the states, I feel like where the most Hispanic people are residing.
Exactly. Yeah. And especially California and even some Mexicans that are closer to like Tijuana and living in then North California, they're different too. It's just, it's very hard to encompass the entire culture just because of that overarching term Latino. It's so big. It's just so big. I don't know. I think it's too big, but don't tell my card company that.
Of course not.
Yeah. But no, they're great. And that's for sale. I think it's like what, $15. It's a lot of fun. It's definitely to play with the family, although some of that was like hard truths, like about Latino men being, promiscuous. I think is one of the cards suggests, or about how grandma's a little racist is one of the cards.
Of course she
things
is.
like that. Yeah. My grandma was bad, and that was what inspired all that.
Yeah, I think most of them are. Those old schoolers are always the worst.
Yeah.
In an interview, you stated something that was interesting to me, and it goes back to what you said. You don't want to be the shock type of comic. Can you talk about the difference between shock and surprise?
Oh, yeah. A couple of years ago, I met Larry Wilmore, who, if you don't know who he is, awesome comedian. I think he had his hands in a lot of different things. One season of The Office as well. And when I met him, I was doing comedy and teaching. We were at Austin Film Festival, and I kind of just like raised my hand and I was like, hey, can you give advice for me? I'm a teacher and comic. And he really just outlined this idea of of surprise versus shock. And he said that a lot of comedians will use shock and think that the joke will be pleasing to everyone, but what it actually does is it splits the audience, because there are some people who have darker humors than others, and it can really just become vulgar, whereas a surprise is just a little bit nicer, and it's usually a bigger laugh because they aren't expecting it. And so when I first started doing comedy, I used to do a joke about abortion, which that already splits the room, right?
Those are great.
Yeah. And my joke was pretty vulgar. Like looking back on it, I was, making a joke about, well, what would I do if I thought I was pregnant? Well, first I would think, I think the first line was I would I would search Amazon to see if they still sold wire hangers. I think I said.
Oh.
And then I said something about somebody pushing me down the stairs or having just someone punch me in the stomach. And so you have shock, right? It's just like, and it's not vulgar, but it's still shocking to talk about killing babies, right?
Right.
So now I still do a joke about abortion. It's just a lot more subtle. I say, I do have one kid. I like to call him the boy that lived. And that's more Harry Potter. And it's more subtle. And It
Right.
always gets a laugh, and it's never that. And I'm always like, hey, it's a little Harry Potter too. And then people laugh at that because I'm minimalizing it. So I think that shock, instead of being overtly vulgar or being overtly direct, it's more being subtle, and just really using more wordplay. I think a lot of people, especially comics that I've seen that are female, will just be really gross, like about dating, and they're like, oh, my pussy, blah. And I'm like, why are you doing that? Who are you trying to impress?
Like in a blatant kind of way, you mean?
Yes, like I have dirty jokes too, but I just feel like time and place. Like if you're at the club, like if you're performing at improv or laugh out loud, like these main clubs, and you're not the headliner, you have no place to be filthy or gross or just shocking for the sake of being shocking. Like you set the tone as a feature, which I featured at LOL and stuff like that. You set the tone for the headliner, and you just don't want to mess up their flow. Like if that's their thing, you should chill. You know what I mean? So I just really, I value surprise. And whenever I accidentally mentor a new comic, which happens more often than I ever thought, I always kind of tell them that it's like, you just want to be smooth. And I always tell them to avoid self-deprecating things at first, because I feel like they're, like you said earlier, I feel like that's the easy way, like, and that's something, how many fat jokes can you tell about yourself, or.
Yeah, and it kind of, I got a buddy, and he's funny. He's funny, and he's not value funny. He's like universal funny.
Mm-hmm.
But he has his self-deprecating sense of humor, which is funny because to the outside it makes it look like he's okay, but it's really him trying to cover the fact that he's not okay. You know what I mean?
Well,
and I feel that's.
Sorry. Yeah.
Go ahead.
It reminds me of just being younger, and how, like, when I was a kid, if there was a bully, like, I would be like, oh yeah, I'm gross or whatever, and I would insult myself first so they wouldn't. So that's what that reminds me of.
Can you talk about the way society has changed? If you look back, one of my favorite movies, and not because it's my personal opinion, but it's just horrendously funny, was Blazing Saddles.
Yeah.
Something like that wouldn't even get past the pitch meeting.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's also comedians that are a lot more edgy. Like, I can think of, like you said, Amy Schumer, Anthony Jeselnik, who's a favorite of mine. So it's kind of like an imbalance between what can be done and what can't be done. But at the same time, there's so many different groups that you're going to upset. There's so many different Facebook groups that is going to come after you for one joke. Can you talk about the way society has changed and how some jokes might not fly anymore?
I think that we definitely are in this weird PC culture where everyone's offended, but they're not quite sure why they're offended. And I always think it's funny. For example, I did a fundraiser for abortion show back in February, and the Current wrote a little write-up about it, and they used a picture of me smiling from a Latino Card Revoke photo shoot. Like, I think I'm holding 2 Latino Card Revoke decks, and I'm smiling, and then it was like the headline had something to do with me performing for abortion. And the comment section was just tearing me apart for being happy in the photo. And like, look, this bitch is happy because she kills babies and all this other shit. And it like roasted me. And I went through and I hearted every single comment because, I'm extra. And I just like, I loved them all. And then I posted a picture of me, at LOL saying that abortion joke that I have, I have one kid, the boy that lived. And that got a lot of responses. And I just thought it was so funny because there was a lot of men not liking me, and it was a lot of women that were like, oh, she's happy to kill children. And I was like, yeah, sure, love it. And it just really got me thinking about how people, they love to demonize. They love it. And unfortunately, I'm not Anthony Jeselnik, and I'm not Amy Schumer, and I'm not, or even, what's his name, that just came out with a new special.
Davidson, Pete Davidson?
Oh, yeah, Pete Davidson, or Louis C.K., any of these big
names.
Louis
C.K.
Yeah, any of these big names, they can say whatever the fuck they want. Because that's who they are. And I think a lot of people, that was another thing. What's his name? Dave Chappelle came out with his special where he was talking about, basically the thesis statement of his special was like, I'm going to say whatever the fuck I want, and I'm going to offend you, right? And you're going to take it. And a lot of people did not like it. But a lot of people loved it. And what I was worried about was that when people saw that special, they were going to be like, oh, I'm going to say, hard R's and like be really offensive. But I think what people missed was that he's Dave Chappelle. You're not, like, I feel like when you reach a certain state in comedy, that you're sort of in a different bracket of what you can say. And I think a lot of people don't understand that there is a hierarchy. I don't advocate for how people react to this offensive culture. I think it's ridiculous, and I think that the way that we communicate now, like with social media and everything like that, just leaves everyone to become this like unread critic, and like just ridiculous. I watched Airplane the other day.
Love Airplane.
Yesterday, yeah.
I made my girlfriend sit through that thing. I love Airplane.
It's good. But what I was laughing about was with my husband. I was like, dude, they can't make this movie anymore. Like, there's just no way. This slapstick humor will never be acceptable. I think MacGruber tries to do the slapstick humor, but it's not as physical comedy as it used to be. Like his was more, it was more of that overtly sexual. So watching Airplane, I was like, look, people are going to get mad because they show tits for no reason. People are going to get mad because that little girl, talks about wanting a black guy.
Any cream, miss? No, I like my coffee black. Like
my man.
Or how about this stewardess? I speak jive.
Yeah. The jive thing that would never happen now, and
so
the steward or the stewardess blowing the fucking inflatable man to get him, back, like that stuff. Somebody would get pissed off, and I was like, Jason, everybody would get mad. Like, this is pretty racist. And Jason's my husband, and he was like, yeah, but it was the times.
But do you feel like it was done? It sounds weird, but do you feel like it was done tastefully? Like, not that they're making fun of the races, but they're making fun of the way the world sees everything.
I think that it was just, I think all comedy shines a light. Like, I think that that's its purpose, right? And I think that they were just showing, and it was 80s and the random nudity. And I don't even think it was in the 80s. I was trying to think when Airplane was released. But I just think it was just definitely toward males. That was the audience it was looking for, was males, right? And, I guess it was 1980. Shit. Okay. I had to look it up. I'm a nerd. I think it was directed towards males. And I think that when I think of like Leslie Nielsen movies in general, I think that they're going for men, right? And just in watching them, I'm like, yeah, some of this shit's funny and some of it's stupid, like it's just dumb humor. And I think that people, when they look at it, they try to find some hidden message, and then some of it is just not hidden, dude. It doesn't mean what you think it means. It's just an errant thought that somebody had that's funny, And I think a lot of people just get offended immediately thinking that like, oh, they're talking about me or, oh, women's rights, you know. I had someone call me, um, a bad feminist once. And I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? You know, and I had just made a joke um, about, it was a marriage joke, I'm sure, just about being a crappy wife. I think I was doing something I think at the end of a joke where I was talking about, killing my husband while he's sleeping because he snores. I made a joke about, you know, sucking his dick, but him sucking a dick instead of me. And they were just like, I don't know. I got attacked by some feminist chick about that. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm telling him to suck a dick. Like, if anything, I'm for your cause, you know? They did not like that. I feel like people will just get offended for no reason. And I don't think it's ever going to stop. And I think it's just going to keep getting worse. But I don't ever write a joke and think, oh, I'm going to piss somebody off. I just think of a way to make it softer. Does that make sense?
Definitely. So because you want that laugh and not a finger point or anything like that.
Yeah, but
Um,
I don't ever think about, because I do jokes where I make fun of white people, but like I'm technically a white person, you know? Um, and I've had some people that are like, go harder on white people. And then I've had other people that are like, leave white people alone. I'm like, okay.
my first set was at a bar, and it was the easiest set ever because all I did was make fun of the Rio Grande Valley, but people loved it. Like it went over so well. And
Yeah.
all I'm doing is like it's more observational humor, what I used to do. A couple of years ago though, when Key and Peele was still on the air, they got in a lot of trouble because they had some sketch about this guy was a war veteran but a burn victim and a paraplegic, and the people got so pissed, like boycotting and all that stuff. But a lot of veterans stuck up for them, including one veteran who's a stand-up comic who
Hmm.
one joke I love from him. He goes, he has burns all over his face. He goes, oh, I toured 3 times in Iraq. The last time was a blast. And you're sitting there and you're just like, oh shit. Like he wants us to laugh, but I feel bad for laughing. So that being said, do you feel like everybody's fair game? Do you feel like everybody should
Yes.
be made fun of him? Yes.
Yes. I do. I do. I think that the purpose of comedy is to laugh, and that if you're nitpicking what's funny and you're taking things apart, I think that you're losing the sight of what you're there for. And I think that comedy is not for everyone. For some people, they just, you know, they don't really see humor, but for others, they really see that laughing is exhilarating. It gives off, you expend so much energy and it just makes you feel better. It's kind of like taking mushrooms, you know, and having like that giggle nonstop, right? Um, Not that I've ever done that,
No,
but
of
you
course not.
know,
No.
yeah.
Peruvians do
Um,
other stuff.
yeah, like ayahuasca. But yeah, no, I think that it's meant to be therapeutic, and that a lot of people are just taking shit too seriously and they need to settle down. I don't like how regulated females are. I feel like males have it a lot easier. Then again, I've experienced a lot of people trying to regulate me. I'll be doing comedy for 3 years in June, and that's not a lot, you know, and I've been really lucky to have had the opportunities that I've had, but I also have a background in writing and I also work really hard, you know, and when you were saying about like what's fair game, I work a lot with Larry Garza, who you probably know.
Yeah.
And he would always, if I was featuring for him, before I'd bring him up, he'd be like, hey, you gotta introduce me and talk about the cancer thing, or else people are going to get mad if I do cancer jokes. And so when I would intro him, I would have to like drop, like he's a stage 4 cancer survivor, you know, just to like get people warm to that idea that,
That he's gonna address it.
he's going to address it. Otherwise turns into him going up there and him doing his jokes, and then they'll be like, "Aw," and we don't want the ahs. We want you to see what's funny about it. So that, I think everything's fair game, and I think that people need to like loosen up, dude. And I think comedy is really important now, but I don't know. I don't know the future of these online shows or what's going to happen. So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for spending the time to take out and come on the show. I do want to tell my listeners though, during this quarantine, you probably grew a beard if you're a man, and if you're a woman, then you probably have a lot of money to make. But if you did grow a beard and you want to keep it together, you want to keep it nice, and you want to come out of this quarantine looking so good for your lady or for your girlfriend, make sure you head over to canyouhandlebar.com. Awesome products, mustache wax, beard oil, beard balm, beard brush, mustache comb. They have everything you need if you have the facial hair to use it for. So go to canyouhandlebar.com, use my promo code DNC Digital, and you get 15% off. Miss Tori Pool, where can they find you on social media?
On social media, you can find me all kinds of places, but probably the easiest is toripool.com. That has my Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, my highly underrated YouTube, which has not that much content, but all those links are on there. It's just easier to find me at toripool.com.
Tori Pool, Miss Tori Pool, thank you so much. I wish I can help promote a show you got coming up, but I can only wish you good luck and say that I really hope that all this stuff gets fixed. Oh, you know what? Before we go, I want you to talk about your love of explaining the difference between your and your.
I can't stop, honestly. Your and your. It's so. How I like to explain it is that, the difference with your is if you were saying you're an asshole, that's 2 words. There's an apostrophe in the middle. But if you said you're asshole, that means your asshole's in trouble, like literally your asshole. I continually correct it if I have dudes in my DMs that are trying to say you're beautiful and they use the wrong your. I definitely snapshot it, correct it, and send it back. And I just recently, one of my cousins who I love wished me a happy Mother's Day. I hope, I forget what she said. She's like, you're a good mom or something. She used the wrong your. And I literally just went and I hit the wow button on the comment. And then she corrected herself. And I was like, yes, I'm an asshole. It's just not that hard, guys. Your is you are. And the your, Y-O-U-R, is possessive. It means your person. Just be better. Just be better, please. Just be better. Yeah, it drives me crazy.
Everybody out there listening, just make sure you be better. Just like Tori. Make sure you wash your hands. Make sure you keep yourself safe. Keep your kids away from the beach, goddammit.
Yeah, stay home.
Make sure your dad are good at home. This is D. You can find me at DNC Digital on Instagram and DNC Digital on Twitter and Facebook at DNC Digital. I want to thank you guys so much for listening. Like, comment, subscribe. ToriPool.com is where you can find all information about her. Like I said, this pandemic, some crazy stuff. Nobody knows what's going to happen, not even our ever-knowing president. So make sure you wash your hands, stay safe, keep your kids and your loved ones safe. This is D, and I am out.